say that this afternoon, to finish the conference, we have 4 very distinguished speakers. We have 2 very distinguished politicians and 2 very distinguished political theorists. So that should make the discussion even more difficult for the rest of us to follow than normal. But I'd add that because in both cases, the speakers are people of limpid eloquence, and I'm looking forward to what they have to say. Professor Legutko is a distinguished philosopher, politician, and I would say diplomat, in the sense that he represents Poland on many occasions when politics is under discussion. But he has been the Minister for Education in Poland. He was the editor of the underground philosophy magazine on behalf of Solidarity during the later years of communism. He is now a member of the European Parliament. I think he was the leader for a while of the Conservative and Reformist group, and is occupying at the moment the position of being, in a sense, the most distinguished defender of a Polish government that comes under attack and doesn't always get the best defense, but gets it from him. On this occasion, he is, however, going to be speaking about not only about the topic of the conference, but what is also the topic of his own book, which I think had a different title in Poland, but which is now published in the United States under the title The Demon in Democracy, and which in a sense is about some emerging trends in liberal democracy which are, on the face of it, contrary to the ideas of liberal democracy that most people had until very recently. So at this point I will fade out and invite Professor Legutko to address us.
Thank you, John. Ladies and gentlemen, I greatly welcome this opportunity to explain a few things about the book I wrote some time ago and published in Poland, and then last year it came out in the United States. The American publisher changed the title. In Polish it was called The Triumph of the Common Man, and the Americans apparently didn't like the word common man, and they changed it into Demon in Democracy. But the title is not inadequate. In short, the thesis of the book is that there have been more and more similarities between communism and, or there are, if you will, communism and liberal democracy. Now, when I first formulated this thesis, I became somewhat nervous because on the one hand, comparing or showing similarity between liberal democracy and communism seems simply outrageous. Such an idea may come from an insane mind. Not a serious person really can make such a claim. And on the other hand, it has become a sort of cliché nowadays, this name-calling. Everybody compares everyone else to Hitler, Nazism, Stalin's, Bolsheviks, fascism. So, as I said, on the one hand, I felt nervous that this thesis would sound too extravagant, and on the other, I was afraid that I would fall within this crowd of people who use the word like fascism, right, or totalitarianism thoughtlessly. Anyway, be it as it may, I wrote this book in Polish, and then at the beginning I want to tell you how this whole notion appeared in my mind. And it wasn't a moment of illumination. It was simply growing and germinating in my mind. It started from the experience that I had in Poland after the fall of the old regime, after the fall of the communism. And after a short period of enthusiasm and joy and hope, there came a moment of disappointment. Of course, there is nothing really surprising about being disappointed with reality. We all are disappointed with reality. But the more I thought about it, the more I discovered certain things which I found rather disquieting. First, what I discovered was that this old division, the pre-independence sort of division during the communist times between the good guys and the bad guys has remained pretty much the same in the liberal democratic Poland. That is, communists were essentially remained the good guys, except some thugs who simply couldn't be defended. But even if you were a big enough thug, you could also become a good guy, like General Jaruzelski. Whereas the bad guys were all those traditionalists, Catholics essentially were the bad guys. The Catholic Church was an institution of bad guys. So this dichotomy between the progressives and the reactionaries, right? This whole concept somehow survived the fall of the old regime. And certainly the former communists not only became respectable people again, but in fact became the advocates of the new system. And they were the judges who were saying, right, what's in accordance with the new system and what is not. So that was the first thing. The second thing, which somehow struck me rather unpleasantly, was that the language that was used at the time, that became a mandatory language, the mandatory sort of discourse, was the language of necessity, not the language of freedom. One would have thought that once the communist institutions collapsed and we found ourselves in at the time and the place of liberty, I mean, we could do anything we would like. The world was open for us. No, almost from day one, there was this message transmitted to us and imposed on us through various channels that there are certain things that have to be done. I mean, there is no certainty, there is no freedom, there's no liberty. You have to do certain things because it is the way the things are done. I remember a debate we had at my university, which is the oldest university in Poland, and right after the fall of the old regime, and there was a debate what to do with in a situation, how we should reform with the situation. And the dominant opinion was that just do not come up with too many ideas, because everybody knows what is to be done. I mean, look at the universities in Germany, look at the universities in Britain or elsewhere. You just have to well, imitate the institutions that exist. The same about the structure of the media, about well, economy, the constitution. Just do not indulge in all these fantasies, because the things everybody knows, especially when we started aspiring to the European Union. I mean, the European Commission has all these solutions for us. So there was this note of dissonance. I mean, come on. I mean, am I living in the land of the free, or aren't we repeating the same sort of necessity discourse that we had to obey in the old regime? And the third type that struck me very unpleasantly was the new notion of social engineering. That I think it was quite similar in Hungary, because I remember I was in Budapest at a conference long time ago. I think it was 1990, and our Hungarian colleagues were saying exactly the same things I had heard in my own country. That is, you have to change the nature of the Hungarian society. We have to change the nature of the Polish society, because they cannot, such as they are, they cannot really find themselves in a new political system. We have to forge, so to speak, a new type of a citizen, a new type of a human person. And since I had enough of social engineering, I was rather dismayed, having heard that again we have to, as we say in Polish, to create a new pole. That was the language used by the communists when they seized the power in Poland after World War II. That was one of the dominant phrases used, creating a new pole. And again, after 4 decades, I heard that again, right? We have to create a new pole. I just do not want to be created, okay? So that was the experience, and I started thinking, well, how I can somehow theorize it? What sort of general idea may give some sense to what I have been observing? And then since I had been very much interested in communism as a set of ideas, as a political practice, in communist Poland, and even wrote some things on this. So first, the first thing that came to my mind was there must be some kind of similarity, because otherwise it would have been unthinkable for these ideas to come out. And then the major point from which I started was that what joins this system, what links them somehow, and makes one reflection of the other, was the predominance of the political system. That the political system seems to dominate and seems to penetrate the entire social fabric. The belief that the world is moving in that direction. I mean, the communists were telling me that the world is moving slowly but implacably towards communism. And the liberal Democrats were telling me that the world is moving slowly but irresistibly towards some kind of liberal democracy. But not only is the world moving, but also it's beneficial. And the communists were telling me it's beneficial. And sooner or later all societies will discover that communism is beneficial to them. So liberal democracy will also be discovered as the most beneficial system. And if so, if that is the direction in which the world is developing, and changing or reversing this direction would be a catastrophe, would be a disaster. So it's obvious that the system, the political system, must be somehow reflected in the society. That is, the more we become communist, the better. Not only communism as a political structure, but whoever lived under communists knows this language, that there has to be socialist education, there has to be socialist morality, socialist citizenship, or communist for that matter. School, society, everything must become communist. It's kind of natural. I mean, if the world is moving toward communism, and communism is beneficial, why just limit communists to one area, to one level of social existence? Everything should become communist. Now, when I had the first-hand experience with liberal democracy, I discovered practically the same. I mean, the word democracy or democratic, liberalism and liberal were everywhere. And it wasn't enough to have a democratic system, multi-party system. We have elections, and now we had a representative government. No, democracy was something more substantial. Everything must become sooner or later democratic. The schools should be democratized. Society in general should become more democratic. Family. Long gone are the days where the father could be a dominant figure. No, the family must become democratic, or liberal democratic, and so on and so on. And universities, of course, schools, everything. So I asked myself, how is it? I mean, the communists, I mean, were they wrong when they say, or were they right when they say that the world has a certain direction, a certain natural irresistibility? And that slowly the society should somehow adapt itself to this trend of development. And were they wrong identifying this development, saying that this was communism? Or were they wrong on both counts? That is, there is neither this irresistible trend and development and no necessity to adapt, to accommodate this society in its entire form to the political structure. And how about liberal Democrats? Is it that they agree with communists on this, that there is this general tendency, but they disagree because the communists were saying that this was communist, and they say that this objective of development is liberal democracy. And I myself believed that they were wrong on both counts. That is, both communists and liberal Democrats. That there is no certainty, that there is no historical necessity, there is no beneficiality, and in fact there is no need to impose a certain political patterns on the entire social life. And the more I started to think about it, the more I discovered that there was something essentially wrong with the words, the language that we were using. Now, take the word liberal. Right? The adjective liberal may be derived from the word liberalism, or maybe derived from the word liberty. So my feeling was that in this new political system, I cannot say we are having less liberty than we used to have, because it would be not true. But certainly, the more liberty we had at the very beginning, as slowly as the system was developing, this liberty was taken away from us. And that was not in contradiction with the idea of liberalism, because I discovered, after having read liberal thinkers, that the liberals didn't like liberty very much. And liberalism is not a system that is conducive to liberty. Certainly not to the extent, for the reasons which I don't quite understand, it became famous for. I mean, liberalism is a system. The problem with liberalism is that the system that usually puts itself above other systems. That is, it's in a way, it's similar to Marxism. Liberals are people who say, we want you to have liberty. That is, we will organize life in a society in such a way that everybody will have as much liberty as possible. We will just establish rules, and you will just operate within those, according to those rules. And then we will withdraw. But as it turns out, they say, well, after the system begins to work, they say, no, 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 it's not enough. Because maybe the system cannot work if there are certain non-liberal areas, right? In this region, there is not enough liberals. So we will organize a life for you in this region. We'll establish rules, and then you will do what you like. But it turns out that it's not enough. Because there are communities that are not liberal, and then liberals come in and they want to organize the life of a community. A school, a family. There is no end to this ambition to organize things for us, to have our liberty. And you can read it in John Locke. You can read this tremendous ambition, right, to intervene in everything in the so-called name of liberty. Now, liberty is, among other things, something which other people should not organize for us. Okay? Let me organize my life and the life of my community. And then liberalism has built a powerful machine to impose these rules, which we are told are conducive to increasing liberty. What in fact has been happening is something the opposite. There is less and less freedom. And before lunch we were talking about it. And this is not communists that are doing it. These are impeccable liberals who are doing it. Who invented political correctness? Not communists. Of course, communists have their own type of political correctness. But anyway, in my book, I give several ideas that show the similarity between this liberal democratic tradition and the communist philosophy, like politicization of the society, like utopianism, the attitude towards religion, which is also very similar, and so on and so on. Now, so once I try to describe it, and mind you, of course, what I wrote in this book is not terribly original, because there were quite famous people who discovered long time ago all the bad things of a certain type of social arrangement. Socrates and Plato were mentioned here before lunch. If you look at criticism of democracy in Plato, you will see that he was perceptive enough to discover something extremely important, namely that there is a tendency to conformity in democracy. And then in a different language it was repeated many years later by John Stuart Mill, by Alexis de Tocqueville, Ortega y Gasset. So this is not something really novel and something that nobody ever thought about. But it was based on my own experience that I tried to formulate on the basis of what I knew and how I saw it living in the place at the time where I lived. So once I did that, I tried to answer another question. That is, what are the roots of the similarity? Why is it that two different systems, and I do not deny that they are different, and nobody in this chamber would, in this place, in this room would deny they are different. But that there are similarities, and these similarities are more and more visible. So what are the reasons? What are the historical and philosophical roots? After all, these seem to be, I mean, communism and liberal democracy seem to be the greatest dreams, political dreams of the modern man. That were the political systems that were meant, that were intended to be the ultimate solution, if you will, of the political problems. That is the establishment of the ultimate framework of political life. And probably two greatest experiments in modernization. So to the question, what are the roots of that account for the similarities? I indicated two things. First, that was this idea of modernization, that both see the world through perspective of modernization. Things have to change and to become modern, so more modern than before. So you cannot just ignore certain aspects of social life, or you cannot ignore certain things that are happening, because everything has to be modernized. And liberal democracy is a way to modernize a society. You cannot leave anything behind. And second, more philosophical root of the similarity, which I try to describe in this book, was anthropology. That is that communism and liberal democracy share a similar concept of human nature, based on the idea of equality. That equality, that is there's the human being who has no fear of the fall, but at the same time has no great aspirations. So he would easily interpret things in the light of his own perspective, and constructed a system that is great and ultimate, and it will implement and it will realize all his wishes and expectations. So the man is small and mediocre, so to speak, no sense of greatness, no sense of guilt or sin, and having this feeling of comfort living in a political construction that is perfect. So as under communism, everybody, well, not everybody, but those who became a part of the system, always use this word communist, socialist, as a form of justification, praise, So nowadays people use this word democratic or liberal democratic, and somehow find comfort in it, and justification for what they do. If they don't feel that there is justification in anything that is democratic or liberal, probably they will feel very bad. And the last, of course, the last question which comes to one's mind, the question which I did not address in my book, which is, of course, the most difficult question of all, is what is to be done? What can we do about it? And and there are two things I can say very briefly. First, that certainly, if you look at the history of political regimes or theory, political theories, democracy is not the best political system, and there was a better type of political system, at least conceptually. It was something that was called a mixed regime. And our societies, which are quite wrongly called democratic society, Western democracies, were in fact mixed regimes until recently, probably, and in some countries still are mixed regimes. And we somehow neglect this aspect of being mixed regimes because we were overwhelmed by this democratic rhetoric. And the second thing, I think that I do not write much about it in the book, but I think it's very important, is the language. And we have to start with the change of the language. If somebody somehow buys my thesis and what I write, that again, this word, the democratic or democracy, we should rather avoid this word because it may mean many things. It may mean the government, it may mean the political system, it may mean a sort of way of behavior, a certain political practice. It may mean a lot of things. So why not just be precise what we want to denote? And what democratic seem to cover too many things and puts us in a position that we are mentally, intellectually not able to go beyond it. And there are many examples of the words that somehow we have come to accept as obvious when they are not. If I may be slightly impolite, I hope John O'Sullivan's generosity and goodness will forgive me, but the word populism is not our word, is their word, so to speak, again, from my perspective. It's not my word, it's their word. So the first thing we should start is to name things. And when we use the word populism to describe the changes that has been happening over the last years or decades in the Western world, we are already losing. Let them, provided they are two parties, let them use our language, and then that will make me very happy. Thank you.